Okay, everybody, welcome to this community call, Integral Dojo community call on stillness and movement, the source and flow of Aikido. My name is Miles Kessler, and I do these community calls from time to time, periodically, sometimes more often, sometimes less. This is the first community call for Aikido I've done in a handful of months. And one of well, there's two reasons I'm doing this call. One is just to kind of get in touch with the community again. But the second reason is because I'm going to be teaching an Aikido seminar in Washington, D.C. Actually, it's not in Washington, D.C. I fly into D.C. It's in Fredericksburg, Virginia, on Labor Day weekend. That's September, I think, 4th and 5th, I'm teaching. And the topic, it's going to be at Aviv Goldsmith Sensei's dojo, Aikido in Fredericksburg is the name of the dojo. And the topic of that seminar, Aviv and I actually planned this seminar even more than a year and a half ago. And then COVID hit. And I think COVID kind of hit the world in around March, at least the States and Europe and here in Israel, hit it around March. And we had a seminar planned for April that we just ended up canceling in the way. So I see Dr. Tom Habib has joined us. Hey, Tom, it's great to see you. Welcome. Anyway, so we were planning on teaching that seminar. It was postponed. And way back then, we actually set up the topic of stillness and movement for that seminar. So we're just going to redo that topic. And it's going to be great. It's going to be the first time I'm back in the States since this whole COVID business hit. And I'm looking forward to the visit, looking forward to meeting all my Aikido friends there again. And this is kind of a warm up for the topic of stillness and movement. And most people here are Aikido people. Tom is not an Aikido person, Tom, but you're still very welcome. You're going to be fine here. You won't feel out of place. Tom's a friend of mine from the Integral community. And Tom and I have done several talks on this topic, but kind of in a different setting. And so just to kind of set up a context. So Aikido is, as everybody knows here, I'm going to preaching to the choir, but Aikido is a 100% life-affirming martial art. It doesn't mean that Aikido can't be effective and destructive. We can easily adapt Aikido to harm somebody if somebody chooses to. Not that I advocate that, but like in all other martial arts, the end sum of the art is to win, and the other person loses. Even a martial art like Tai Chi, where there's no fighting or competition, the moves and the katas do tend to end in some type of break or whatever. Tai Chi and of course Qigong is slightly different, but Tai Chi is very much on the edge of really being a spiritual art, and martial, the same way that Aikido is. But in Aikido's design, its philosophy and its application, everything is a life affirming. So in other words, it's not designed to harm another person, but rather to resolve conflict. I think everybody who does Aikido, regardless of if that's your interest or not, everybody who does Aikido understands that that's what it is. It's the art of the what's called the art of peace, but it's the way of harmony. And to be a little bit more precise with what Aikido is, it's the way of harmony in the midst of conflict. So when everything's nice and copacetic and everybody's happy and we're all just kind of hanging out and it's going well, there's no need for Aikido. There's it's already resolved. We're in this kind of coherent space. But when there's a little bit of friction, when two boundaries start to rub up against each other, it creates conflict, where two perspectives can't occupy the same place at the same time. And if we're not really careful, in fact, I would say it's guaranteed that friction, when it reaches a certain critical mass, which might, in me, it might be a high level of tolerance on Monday, and on Tuesday, it's a low level of tolerance, or in the morning before my coffee, it's a low level of tolerance, and there's a higher level of tolerance of conflict. And it might be different from you, from me. So that's all kind of variable, this kind of level of tolerance that we have in the midst of conflict. But when we reach that level of tolerance, all of the bells and whistles and the warning flags are going to be going off. Danger, danger, danger. This is a dangerous moment, and we have to do something about it. And what do we do about it? And this is all pre-cognitive, kind of before we even start to think. Oh my God, we come up with either fight, flight, or freeze. We are hardwired to fight. We are hardwired to run away. We are hardwired to freeze in the midst of an actual threat or perceived threat. And that could be something that's, physically for life and limb is in danger. That's kind of when we all got hardwired, back in the cavemen, cavewomen days. But also in just a little, the simple conflicts of, let's have a conversation right now about politics, and sooner or later, probably sooner, there'll be some level of conflict coming up. Let's have a conversation right now around COVID. Sooner or later, there's going to be some level of conflict, and it's our tendency to, when the conflict comes up, we've got fight, flight, and freeze. When the conflict is not coming up, it's our tendency to hang out with the people we feel that there's a lot of sameness with. That we, in Aikido, the reason we come to the dojo is because we try to set up conditions where we can actually work with difference, where we can meet, practice, work, model, and then remodel. And, we take turns attacking and we take turns receiving what it's like to be attacked, what it's like to be in conflict. And, and we learn really, really, really simple basic principles on how to be present in the midst of conflict. And at the same time, we're learning a lot of highly advanced technical skills of how to cope and deal and move and work with conflict. But it's the principle of really, the basic principles of how to give space to all of those triggers, in a way, all of those bells and whistles that are coming up, give space to it so they can come up, because they're naturally going to come up. If they don't naturally come up, we're either going to suppress them or we're going to deny them, probably, or we just indulge them. We just go for it. Yeah. Okay. We justify why I can fight back, or we justify why we can run away, or we justify, well, no, I guess it's fight back or run away, or we basically suppress that stuff, the fear of running away. And when I say suppress, I mean with zero mindfulness. It's just a coping mechanism. We just kind of push it down, or we suppress the aggression inside of us, or we just go into some type of denial. These are kind of the three things. Indulging things, denying them, or suppressing them. These are resisting them in a way. These are the kind of the three things that we make if we don't have mindfulness. And that's what we're learning in the dojo. And the way we learn that in the dojo is we learn it first by, well, let me ask you can write it in the chat. What are some of the things that we learn in an Aikido class on how to cope with all of these feelings that come up in the midst of conflict? How to cope with stress, how to cope with fear, how to cope with pressure, how to cope with danger, how to cope with complexity, not complexity, complicated situations. Once there's two people, there was one person, now there's two. Oh my God, how do I cope with that? Or somebody's attacking me with a stick now, or somebody's grabbing me from behind, all these things that we do in Aikido. What are some of the ways that we cope? You can just open your mic and just tell us some of the basic exercises that we do in Aikido. Steve, I see you're fiddling with your mic. No? Nobody has any idea?
Yeah,
Thanks, Greg.
I listening to what you say, it conforms to a lot of in a lot of ways to what I want to bring to the veteran community. Veterans themselves are very hard, and right. What I was jotting down there was that maybe that fight, flight, freeze. The mindfulness of the whole situation, that it allows you situational awareness. And if you've got your may I right, that spacing between, then it allows both parties that opportunity to flight or walk away from the potential conflict. It can give you space to talk it out. It can give you space to work it out. So
work it through, right? Yeah,
work it
that's
through.
great.
Yeah,
That's great. So what I heard is awareness, if there's awareness too, and then what was the other thing that I heard? I forget what it was. Did you say? Centering. Oh, the my eye. Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, you were talking about the my eye. So finding that right kind of boundary distance. When the boundary is too close, it's dangerous, and then it's really intense. If it's too far, it's just it's so not dangerous that we're in a way we can become complacent. So we find that right distance to where, okay, that's the developmental edge. Now we can work with that. So those are two really wonderful exercises on how to kind of cope with all the feelings and what do you say, reactions that come up when we have either a real conflict or a perceived conflict. Awesome, great. Anybody else? I mean, yeah, Steve, go ahead.
We learn centering.
Perfect.
And we learn slowing down and observing.
Nice.
Very similar to meditation, actually.
Yeah, perfect. Good. So centering is kind of the first thing that everybody learns, and it's an embodied centering. Of course, centering can also be in the mind. We can do centering in the heart, but an embodied centering, it's a practice that everybody does. And you said slowing down for me, what slowing down does is that the window of opportunity to skillfully work with a conflict is incredibly thin. And what slowing down does, it opens it up. It opens that window. It's like, oh wow, okay, I've got a little. Now I can work. I can even make mistakes here and kind of back up a little bit and fix them. And there's a lot that we can do when we slow down. So those are two great practices. Let's go to Piero. What else? What other practices we do in the dojo, Piero? When on how to kind of deal with this conflictual energy that comes up within us?
I think the first thing is to accept it as a conflict,
Mm-hmm.
to connect to it, and to find the right place in it.
Beautiful. Acceptance, connection, and find the right place. What do you mean by find the right place?
It depends. Where the conflict can be met by me, to take my role in the conflict.
Right, to find your role.
Often it has to do with centering, of course, but centering of the conflict, not centering of me. So,
right. Yeah, beautiful. Awesome. So there's one other that I'm basically going to explain this a little bit for Tom, because Tom doesn't do Aikido, but everybody here kind of knows it. The first thing that we learn in it when we go to an Aikido class, Tom, is what's called Ukemi, which is falling down. How to either fall backwards or fall forwards with a roll in a way that's harmonious. And what's really interesting is that we are evolutionarily designed to be standing up. We can sit down, we can lay down, but from a standing position, falling is not something that our system wants to do. And the way that the system reacts is like we reach to grab something, for security, or we put our hands out like this, and there's just a strong kind of contraction resistance that comes up, thank God, because if we fall down the stairs, we want to be able to kind of grab something. It is an intelligence. But what we teach people in Aikido is that there's a technique where you actually go with the energy of the fall, and that energy goes into a smooth roll. It takes a little bit of time to kind of, round off the corners, and we practice on mats, so you get to learn that. But eventually, it transforms the fear of falling into the joy of flying. And at a certain point, you can see with beginners, they're training for a while, and then suddenly they just love flying. They love falling because it's like flying around, and they love throwing, and they love being thrown, and it really kind of moves into this beautiful space where suddenly we're not in a kind of survival reactive place around with gravity, when things are falling down, when we're being thrown or pinned or whatever it is, but actually we learn how to go with it. And then we learn that there's a lot of energy in going with it that kind of makes the coming back up kind of effortless. So these are, yeah, Adrian, please.
Just to say that this makes me think of actually before the break falls, we do the posture, we do the kamai. And actually they are very linked, because is
Totally.
Another thing we learn is posture and balance, being grounded. But then that makes me think of stillness. And with the break fall is the movement. The first movement probably that we have to learn is the Ukemi school. We have to learn how to fall, right, and to go from sort of stillness to a roll.
Yeah, exactly. And to go with the roll or go with the falling in a centered way. You know, usually falling down, you know, when we fall down, we kind of lose our center. Or imagine you're in an earthquake or on a boat, and the foundation is falling apart underneath us. So there's automatically, you know, going like that. So this is just teaching us to really center and ground. And I love that you pointed out, and this was really where I was going with this. I love that you pointed that there's stillness within that. And that's the whole point of today's topic, stillness and movement. It is a Zen saying. It is one of the polarities or the dualities that they work with in Zen. In Japanese, it's Sei To Do, stillness and movement. And within stillness, there is movement. Within stillness, there is always movement, and within movement, there is always stillness.
I have one more.
Oh yeah, please, Tom. Yeah, please.
So I know you and I have made this point before, how these right practices show up in many different venues. Of course, today's about Aikido, but relating more to the personal. I remember when I was first married and there was conflict, and how much despair and confusion I felt early on. And through years of practice and evolution, this morning we were dealing with an issue that was a little bit testy. And there was a lot more acceptance on my part that this is just the evolutionary process unfolding. Rather than catastrophize the energy, just kind of funneling it and doing with it what it needed to do. So I love these fractals that keep showing up in different venues. And I know you and I were marveling at that in the past.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really great. But just for everybody, Tom's a therapist, and he also, I think, a lot of his therapy is couples therapy, and we've shared panels and we've done workshop meetings like this around you know, the magic of conflict and relating, basically. So that's a beautiful, you know, early on when we start to become aware of it, we were aware that, oh my God, it's just like, you know, this is. I love that you use the word catastrophizing. Conflict, it's catastrophe, and now after probably some decades of practicing, there's still that, okay, this is testy, but it's not catastrophizing anymore. It's like, this is where the process needs to go, and it moves into some kind of evolutionary wholeness in a way. That's beautiful. So okay, so now what are the internal conditions and what are the external conditions for this, for everything that we spoke about, you know, that we spoke about? And by the way, you know, when we do Aikido, it's great. It's a wonderful practice. We're practicing all this in an embodied way, but this is not bound by Aikido. These are universal principles. And what makes a universal principle, or what makes a principle universal? In fact, if it's not universal for me, it's not a principle. It's just a thing. But if it's universal, that means that if it works here, it works over there. That if it's a principle in Tel Aviv, it's a principle in San Diego where Tom's at, or it's a principle in at 4 a.m. in Brisbane where Craig's at. Or if we go to the moon, it's the same principle there. Or if we're doing it with a big person, it's the same person. We're doing it with a small person. Same with by myself, it's a principle. And in relationship or in multiple relationships, it's a principle. So that's why there's so much energy and richness to these types of explorations, because it's something that we can all relate to. And even though we all may experience it in relatively different ways, at the level of principles, the principle inside of me of connection or of center, and the principle inside of Craig and Piero and Adrian and Tom and Victoria and Charles, etc., inside of you is the same principle. And that's where, and that's where you and I are actually one. Miles is a very, really relative person. You're a very relative people over there. That's why we have conflict. But when we can come to the point of these principles, we actually realize that that's the similarity right there. That's the oneness. That's the universality. So several years ago, probably close to 10 years now, I don't remember exactly what it was, but in CERN, Switzerland, they set up a particle collider, superconductor particle collider, whatever it's called. And they were looking for the Higgs boson particle. And it was a big deal when it happened. You know, people saying you can't find it, or if you do it, it's going to open up a black hole, and you know, we're all going to get sucked in. And they managed to find it. And this, again, I'm not a physicist, so give me a little bit of just general. I'll be fuzzy with the science. The Higgs boson particle is the origination of matter. It's like the first particle. In fact, they called it the God particle. Why did they call it the God particle? Because that's the first particle that creates every other particle. And they were able to somehow discover it by splitting an atom at incredibly fast speeds. Big deal. But it took incredible conditions to do it. You know, they built this particle accelerator and science, and they had lots of experiments and lots of years, and the theory was there for a long time, but they were able to create it. And I'm going to speak in Aikido terms today, Tom, but you'll see the fractal, you'll see the application everywhere. The resolution of conflict also has its kind of Higgs boson's particle. It is just a metaphor right now. So I'm not saying there's actual Higgs bosons there, but what are the conditions to discover it is that when two energies come together in conflict, yeah, or I should say two boundaries, you know, floating around in space, come together and boom, they touch, and maybe they press into each other, and there's a conflict, you know, a lot of energy going back and forth. And by the way, this doesn't have to be with another person. I mean, often that's how we experience conflict. It could just be, you know, Craig was talking about working with veterans who probably have some PTSD and whatever from you know, the time that they went through. So conflict can be solo and individual, but we have this kind of pressure. And when these two boundaries come together, at the center of the two boundaries is a still point. No matter what's happening out here, all this kind of crazy, he said this, she said that, you did this, why, no. At the center of that, no matter all the chaos outside, at the center of it, there is a still point. And there is a lot of energy around that still point. You know, I mean, it's almost like Star Wars, when he turns on the lights and the force, the energy of the force comes together, right? So here's conflict. These two boundaries are kind of like that. And as soon as they connect, boom, there's like a field of energy around that conflict, right? And that field of energy is usually kind of unpleasant, not so nice. But think about human nature, like sexuality. Same thing. You know, this is a very agreeable type of coming together of boundaries, creates another type of energy, and that's rather agreeable. But it's still, there's an energy field there. At the center of every conflict, where two boundaries are pressing together, there is a still point. And out of that still point, it's coming energy. The energy is coming out of that still point. Aligning with that energy, if we're able to kind of, you know, let go of my agenda. You know, let's say Tom and I are in conflict. I let go of, okay, we get, you know, I want something, Tom wants something, so we have a conflict, it gets testy. If in those moments, I'm able to kind of let go of my agenda and just be in connection, like Piero was saying, be centered, be open, find the right distance, like Craig was saying, the ma'ai in Japanese, and Tom is able to do the same thing, then we can actually listen to the center of that conflict. And we can listen, we can drop into the still point. and we can align with the energy of that conflict. And you know, just like they discovered the Higgs boson particle when they collided these two atoms together, out of that still point comes energy, and that energy is Aikido. That's the Aikido particle, because that energy wants to move into wholeness. If I'm not so aware and awake in that moment, I'm going to have my agenda and I won't be able to hear that energy. If the person I'm in conflict with in that moment has their agenda or their needs or their desires or their fears, or, you know, all the stuff that comes up in all of us, if we're kind of triggered and acting out, they won't hear it, I won't hear it. So it takes really, really, really special external and internal conditions to be able to align with that energy. And the movement of that energy is Aikido. That's the Aikido particle. In order to discover that, first and foremost, we have to be able to drop into silence. We have to be able to drop into some level of stillness. And that's the first part of the stillness and movement duality, where these two dualities actually come together as a unified, complementary whole. And we do have stillness practices in Aikido, but probably the most direct stillness practice is some type of meditation or introspection or just stopping. You know, stopping and watching all of the, you know, like these snow globes, you know, those little toys for kids, snow globes. You shake it up and then the snow's flying around. The moment we stop, we just see the snow flying everywhere. And it can take a few seconds, can take a few minutes for all of that noise to drop down to where we're in the stillness. And we need to have practices where we can actually find the snow globe dropping down into stillness as a preliminary for some type of ability to align with the energetic principle or the energetic movement at the center of all conflicts. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just kind of do a quick round and see if there's any questions or if that makes sense to everybody. I see that Mr. Roy has joined us. Hey, Roy, how's it going? Nice to see you. Great. So what are some stillness practices? What are some stillness practices that you do? It's gonna be formal from Aikido, from meditation. It could just be something that you do in your life that kind of works for you. But I'd love to hear about any type of stillness practices that people might have.
I think you start your stillness practice in initial warm-ups. I think you start your stillness practice when you conduct key exercises to start that centering. Certainly working in the security field, crowd control, you need a stillness about you so you don't engender a sense of fear or something with those that you may be dealing with in a nightclub or a pub or something like that. You need to be I don't want to get into conflict with one person because inherently other people will join in those circumstances. So it's very dangerous if you're working alone or
yeah, that's
like
kind of
that.
I mean, I've never worked in such a field. Do you work in that field?
I have done so, yes.
Right. I can imagine it's very volatile. It's very volatile. Like it could get out of hand really quick.
It can. So you've got to be very careful about what you say, how you act, how you move, how you position your hands. So it's all part of that stillness
fantastic.
in a workplace. Yeah.
Great. Anybody else? Exercises that you have or that you have in your dojo or that you do elsewhere, formal, informal, that enhance stillness for you? Yeah, Piero?
I would say all grounding practices have this idea.
Yeah, can you give some examples?
Oh, in any position, you grounding in with movement or without movement, it gives you the stillness of the ground. And this can also change into flying, because flying is related to ground too. But you can find this stillness also in flying.
When you say flying, do you mean like in an airplane?
No. In
Like Superman?
yeah, rather like
Yeah. I
No,
do
I
that with
mean,
my kids, actually.
yeah. No, I say that because in motion, if you are in motion spiritually and mentally, often people tell you, go ground.
Right.
And at one point, I realized that I can ground flying.
Yeah, totally. In the air.
Yes, I have more overview on the situation, and I'm related, of course, to the ground, but in the air.
That's
with
fantastic.
a certain distance, and so
Yeah,
that's
great.
what I mean.
Great. I think Victoria rose her hand, and then we'll go to Carl. Yeah, hi, Victoria.
Yes, hello everyone. I am very new in Aikido. I've been only 5 years in Aikido, so I am kind of lacking authority in this very respectful audience. But for me, for example, a grounding practice is Qigong practice, which is really grounding, working with the breath, working with the weight of the body, working with your mind. As well, yoga naturally for me, very grounding practice, as well as breathing is very grounding practice, and meditation.
Great.
Thank you for a mile. So it's a grounding practice.
Yeah, and can you tell me, like in yoga, because I know you're a yoga teacher. What about how do these practices relate to the principle of stillness?
You know, talking about a yoga these days, it's a very big conversation because a yoga is a yoga in many interpretations.
Right.
I do study and learn a yoga which I call centered yoga, or my master is a centered yoga. So we actually study a yoga based on 8 principles. And principle number 1 is meditative state of mind. Principle number 2, non-doing of the physical body. I mean, don't use a muscle, don't muscle in. So a meditative state of the physical body,
awesome.
Or don't muscle in, let it go, don't do with the muscles, yes? So meditative state of mind, meditative state of the physical body. Principle number 3 is intent. So have intention. You should have intent what you are doing, where you are going. When you know intent, then you need to center. And so meditative state of mind, non-doing of the physical body, intent, centering, then rooting. Rooting, it means using a gravity, not fighting a gravity. So use your gravity. Rooting down. After we root it down, then we do a physical shape, which we call asana, or form, any form. And then when we done a physical shape, we breathe. And after we breathe, we elongate. Elongate, it means spine, and you align energies through the energy lines. So for me, that is very inclusive and very special form of yoga, which is a centered yoga of Donna Holleman. So it's not everyone translates yoga like us, but this is a grounding practice for me. And this is why, it's a reason why from this yoga stand, I went to Aikido. And I see that Aikido, when you come with prepared body, it takes you, how to say, to the very interesting journey, because it includes all these principles, which I just mentioned, in a completely different level. They just like lift you up and make you, as Pierre said, make you fly, move, and engage with another person energy. Because a yoga is quite individual energetic trip.
Right.
And here is you engaging with another energy center. So it's a fascinating.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome. Thank you.
Time. Yeah.
When you were listing those principles, I was actually turning in, listening, and turning in, and actually relating them to Aikido practice. Because I know yoga is a solo practice, but
Yeah.
then when we bring that into the relationship,
Yeah.
it's very cool. But when both people are doing those principles, because I think we also do those in some ways in Aikido,
Yeah.
and they bring those into the relationship, then, as you said, the relationship has a life of its own. And like I was saying before, that out of conflict comes this energy. The energy is Aikido, because that energy wants to move towards wholeness. It doesn't, it's not zero sum, it's positive sum. It moves towards wholeness in a way that doesn't sacrifice any position, but actually grows into, it heals, it integrates. That's
Totally
beautiful.
agree. Yeah. Beautiful practice. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you,
for your
Victoria.
time.
Great. Let's go to Ronnie.
Well, for me, a very almost physical practice in stillness is when, for example, in Aikido, you get grabbed very firmly and you need to relax within that pressure that is coming from the other one. So the stillness is like relaxing and physically listening to the force that is coming towards you.
That's
I don't know if
beautiful.
that makes
Patrick,
sense.
it makes it makes sense to me. It makes total sense. Patrick likes to say, he has this great, Patrick's a friend of ours that Tony knows, I know, and Patrick Cassidy Sensei is an Aikido teacher. He also does conflict resolution work. And he has a really simple way of looking at this. And, we're talking about creating the conditions where we can be with stillness, right? And out of stillness comes the movement, right? Instead of doing something in the movement, I do Aikido on my partner, I do conflict resolution, let me do some NVC, I'm sure Tom would probably say the same, I'm gonna do a therapy on you. It's not how it works. It's like we meet in the right conditions and then it's done through us. And Patrick has a beautiful way of describing this, super, super easy to understand. Conflict happens, we move from, oh shit, there's conflict, to, if we're practicing, to, okay, that's kind of, I've made that internal move and I'm centering, I'm from oh shit, where I'm kind of completely lost, and then okay, now I'm kind of working with it to and if we can stay with that in the conflict, just like Tom was talking about, when things get testy, but we're working with it, then it moves into, oh wow, we go from oh shit to okay to, oh wow, look what's happening here, this thing's got a life of its own. And then the final step is, oh, thank you. Because then we realize that this is where it was meant to go. And we could never understand that without, in a way, diving into, once more into the breach, without entering into the breach willfully, with open mind, centered, open heart, staying connected. Without doing that, we would never go from oh shit to okay. I mean, that's probably the best we can do. Oh shit to okay. But then we get to the oh wow part. And then we realize it's just like, oh, thank you. Thank you for the conflict. Because that's not, I'm a more whole person. We are a more whole people. Roy.
Yes.
How you doing?
It's wonderful.
Yeah, any thoughts?
No, not really. The birds are outside and they're in the garden, and there's birds on here too. Tweet, tweet, tweet. Yeah.
Resting
How
in
are
the
you?
stillness. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's nice to meet you here. We've never met.
Oh, we haven't met yet. This is just an introduction.
Yeah. I spoke with you about Don. I spoke with Don about you, whatever, some months ago. I think you did an interview with Bjorn or something like that. Is that possible?
Oh, you remembered his name. That's great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I knew it was somewhere. And then, yeah, Bjorn. So after that, I said, hey, Don, do you know Roy? And yeah, we spoke a little bit about you. But it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, I enjoy dialogue.
Yeah, me too.
Leaving space for other people to talk and share. And share experience. I'm a real big fan of Carl Rogers, if you know who he is. Maybe Tom does.
I know the name, but I'm not so familiar with him. He's also a dialogue person.
Where's Tom?
Oh, as Roy said, Carl Rogers did client-centered therapy, and he was aware that every moment feeling contained and loved really transformed the experience. So I love your reference, Miles. We don't do therapy on people. We create moments in which their own abilities to grow can be done. So even though Carl didn't have quite the meta theory to hold that, Roy's setting something right, because he would set such a great intention of inclusion that growth would, our fear would get out of the way and growth would just happen. I think that's where you're tapping, Roy.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Adrian?
I think Victoria described beautifully the 8 principles, which, like you said, made me think of the Aikido and how to apply them in Aikido and my Aikido. And they are all there, the intent and all that. And then I think that that's all having to do with the stillness. They apply to Aikido maybe, again, as solo practice. If you think of maybe meditation, maybe other arts like Tai Chi, we integrate in Aikido or Qigong. But if you take that further and you think working with a partner, you move into the movement. So you add some more principles when you have a partner, like get off the line first, take the balance of your partner. You start to add maybe, once you get it, like you nailed it, you put in speed, you put economy, you start to reduce. So these are principles promoted by TCS, I think. So you add up and you build up, or the axis, he says about axis. So now as you're solo in yoga, if you talk about yoga or meditation, you are introspective and you are having your own axis, but now you have another axis of your partner, and how you're going to become the axis or the center axis of the both that create the movement. So that's what I'm saying. We move from stillness to movement, and then you finish the technique probably, and you again in the stillness sort of position.
Beautifully. Right, beautiful. Yeah, and not to say that there's no place for technical doing, because it's also part of our art. And especially, if you need to do Aikido, like do Aikido, in a moment of truth, then by all means do Aikido. But what I'm talking about is something that's a little bit more kind of to the internal principle of the art, where our muscle memory, like all the thousands of hours that we've spent perfecting, Aikido techniques, is just in us. And there's no, anytime, like when we're practicing Aikido, if I go, okay, it's going to be katate dori, kaikanagi or something. So this is the name of a technique in Japanese. So I get up to do that technique. What I'm doing is I know the technique from the past. I'm going to do it in the future, and I'm just going to repeat that. There's nothing wrong with that training, but that's different than actually meeting in the present moment and listening to where does the relationship want to go. Where does the conflict, where does the pressing together of boundaries want to go? And again, to be able to do that, we must be able to drop into some deep listening. So I thought we'd finish off with, this was meant to be about an hour. We might go over a little bit, but I thought we would finish off with a really simple exercise, a sentence completion exercise, where, I give the sentence stem and there's going to be a blank. And then we, if it was a bigger group, I would say we're going to go into breakouts, but maybe we just do it with this many people. And if you want to do this exercise, leave your camera on. If you don't want to do this exercise, turn your camera off. We're going to take turns. And the sentence is very simple. As I drop into this moment, I am noticing blank. You don't have to say my exact words as I drop into this moment, but in this moment, assuming that we're becoming more quiet, in this moment, I am noticing blank. Now you're going to notice one of two things. You're going to notice something on the inside of you. Actually, one of three things. You're going to notice something on the inside of you. You're going to notice something on the outside of you, or you're going to notice something on the inside of us. Like, you know, this is happening. Now this on Zoom, if it was real physical presence, then there's a little bit more space between us. But whatever you're noticing is fine. It doesn't really matter. But drop into a subtle attention and then share. Does everybody okay with that? It's clear. In this moment, I am noticing blank. So I think Charles and Victoria, you'll have to get your computer a little bit closer, or you'll have to move closer if you want to do this exercise. And we're not going to go into breakouts. We're just going to go around, and I'll start, and then I'll call somebody's name, and then you can go. So in this moment, I am noticing what's the word? The unknown. I don't know. A little bit of apprehension. I don't know. Craig.
Well, this is hard. In this moment, I'm noticing calmness within myself, and understanding that of all of you, of people that I've not physically met before.
Great. Yeah, well, let's try to keep the sentences as short as possible, because we're going to do several rounds. Yeah. Victoria.
In this moment, I notice the presence of all of you. I notice people. I notice presence.
Ronnie. Oh, your mic, Ronnie.
In this moment, I have a lot of physical sensations.
Carl.
I notice that I need to let go of doing Aikido and be sensitive and quiet enough to let Aikido do me.
Piero.
In this moment, I'm noticing attention.
Adrian.
This moment I feel more relaxed, as I came from another class, so I feel more relaxed.
Tom.
As I drop into this moment, I notice gratitude.
As I drop into this moment, I notice joy. Craig.
As I drop into this moment, I'd notice gratitude as well. Yes, thank you.
Ronnie.
As I drop into this moment, I start to feel connected.
Victoria.
As I drop into this moment, I feel experience around me. I feel experienced people around me.
Carl.
Also, gratitude for the way the energy is playing out right now.
Piero.
At the moment, I notice community.
Adrian.
This right moment, I feel I smile more than at the beginning. And I see people more, yeah, probably happier, or I don't know, at the beginning, I didn't feel that. Less tension, yeah.
Okay. Tom?
As I drop into this moment, I notice Victoria's abundance.
Roy, if you want to jump in, here's a good place.
a leaf falling on a stream, moments beyond moment, beyond moment, beyond. Now is a screwdriver making holes for mushrooms to grow in a mushroom farm out back. So a little bit of drilling, sort of like drilling right now. Drilling.
Yeah, in this moment, I'm noticing fullness. And Craig?
In this moment, I'm noticing awareness.
Ronnie?
I notice in this moment that my mind starts to drift.
Victoria?
As I drop into this moment, I feel a common thread going between us.
And Carl?
Potential, growth.
Piero?
This moment I'm feeling fulfillment.
Adrian?
This moment, as you said, I hear people around me and they finish dinner and I'm feeling hungry.
And Tom?
In this moment, I notice Roy's expansion.
And Roy?
Yes. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, we're doing a sentence completion. In this moment, or as I drop into this moment, I notice blank.
The first thing that is reflected is it is not me dropping. It's not me, not self, anatta.
Let's do one more round. This will be our last round. In this moment, or as I drop into this moment, I notice quietude, stillness. Great.
As I drop into this moment, I notice reflection.
Ronnie?
As I drop into this moment, I feel quiet, peace.
Victoria?
As I drop into this moment, I feel that I have nothing more to say.
Carl?
Flow, movement in stillness.
Piero?
I'm just feeling common presence.
Adrian?
This very moment, I feel that this is going to finish soon. I'm hungry, but I feel that I need to spend another 5 minutes probably just to ruminate a bit.
And Tom?
In this moment, I notice moments of decoherence.
Hmm. And Roy?
Coffee.
All right. So the whole point of this exercise and of this session is that when we can drop into the stillness, especially in relationship, because there's something about two beings coming together that in a way activates an energy of multiplicity. The energy is multiplied. Instead of just my energy and Tom's energy, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's just kind of multiplied, and that could be in friendship, it could be in conflict. It doesn't really matter. But there's a coming together of the energy in the right way, like Craig was saying. The Japanese word is ma'ai, the correct distance with space in between the boundaries. Too far away, there's no energy. Too close, it's overwhelming. You find that right place, and that energy emerges. In order to align with that energy, we must have practices to drop in to stillness, individually, but also relationally, especially relationally. And that's, you could say that's half the equation, because it is half the equation, because the other half is the movement. But actually, I feel that's more like 80% of the equation, because the movement that comes out of that kind of resolves itself. And if we can align with that, especially with some type of muscle memory, the skills that we learn through Aikido or yoga or anything for that matter, then the chances of it resolving in a positive sum are rather good. Yeah, so before we finish off, does anybody have any final comments or questions or observations? Tom?
I love the emphasis on stillness, because as you know, I always go back to the couples, that there's so much that want to emerge in those high energy moments, that if you don't quiet it down, there's almost no choice, and there's no chance of cohering. Because in couples, when there's conflict, it almost feels like, the couples are at war.
Right.
But when they quiet it down, there's more opportunity for integration and for that energy to coalesce. So I love how you put the stillness at the center of being aware of paths and emergence.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? Final thoughts before we say goodbye? This is one of the things that I do with my meditation group. We'll meditate, and then after meditation, I'll say, okay, anybody have any questions? And everybody feels still that there's no questions. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. There are, when you drop into stillness, everything does kind of resolve itself. But, we want to kind of find that edge, always find that kind of developmental edge, that evolutionary tension. Okay, last chance, Craig or Victoria or Charles, Ronnie, Carl, Roy, Piero, or Adrian. All right, everybody. So I want to thank you for joining me in this community call. If anybody's going to be on the East Coast in the States, I'll be in Fredericksburg, Virginia, outside of DC, on Labor Day weekend, September 4th and 5th, for an Aikido seminar on the topic of stillness and movement, the source and flow of Aikido. And other than that, I hope to see you all again, certainly in person, but I guess the chances are probably we're going to meet again online somehow. I want to wish you all a great practice, and may your practice continue to lead you forward, forever and always forward, from stillness to movement in Aikido and in life. And thank you, everybody. Adrian, have a great meal.
It's not all about me. Thank you.
It's good to see.